gone ahead and started recording our session just to have it as a resource. It will not be posted, but there are a number of folks who had registered that said they would have liked to have listened in, and potentially could I share it with them. So only registered folks will get a copy of this one. On your draft agenda, you've got a couple of items I want to chat with. I shouldn't assume everybody knows me. I'm Kendall Tyree. I'm the executive director of the association, and I'm lucky to be in our office today with a couple of our speakers and folks who help organize our efforts. So if my fellow folks in the office want to introduce themselves.
Susie Brown from Loudon. I'm the district operations manager there and chair of the admin ops committee.
Hey guys, it's Blair Gordon, DCR Soil and Water Conservation District Liaison.
Right. I know there are that many people in the waiting room and already joined. We're up to 45-ish. So you can drop your name and your district in the chat box for us rather than us go around and do introductions today. I'd really appreciate it. Okay. On your agenda, I'll dive right in. There's a number of virtual trainings that are currently planned that I wanted you to have on your radar. While they might not necessarily work with your own personal training needs, certainly wanted, as many of you are admin and district managers, to know what's happening from the association level that might be of value to folks in your office. May 4th upcoming is thank you, is a VCAP training. What BMP where? This is really with our new VCAP staff to talk more about site guidance and visits. It will be virtual, June 8th, conservation selling skills in the morning. Also, many of you have registered for this one already. Will be taught by Bobby Whitescarver. It is open for anybody and everybody. While it does get conservation certification credit, if you are a director, associate, or any staff are interested, we are encouraging anybody and everybody to come. Certainly we'll make sure you get the credit where needed for conservation planning. We will be recording that one also, and for folks who are getting certification, we'll probably put you in a breakout room specific to that group to work with Bobby Whitescarver, but it will be a really great training session overall. June 15th, I'm working with NRCS to do an urban agricultural agency info session virtually. This is where DOF, Extension, Master Gardeners, us, NRCS will all come and really talk a bit about our programs and how we can all cross collaborate a bit better. You'll see more information on that one shortly, but wanted that one on your radar. June 22nd is our quarterly board meeting for the Association and Education Foundation. It will also be virtual at 9 a.m. This is where I also hope that board will be approving your annual plan of work, which you will be looking at and reviewing today, adding any new ideas and details for 2022. Susie will probably speak later in the agenda to some proposed dates, but we met as a planning group with Terry this morning to talk about some things like the retainer hours. And based on her schedule coming to the next meeting, we really have some good ideas and would love for her to be available. We are tentatively planning that next training date for the admin ops on June 22nd in the afternoon at 1 o'clock, following the association's quarterly board meeting. So keep that on your radar. We'll talk about that later in the agenda, and Susie can allude to some of that. And then July 27th is Ag 101 training in person. This is for new staff, many who don't have an ag background and would be interested in joining for a one-day Ag 101 training session with Bobby Whitescarver on his farm and some seasoned district staff. That is a quick overview of some trainings that are on the horizon, but I certainly recognize there's a gap in those currently planned trainings with lack of topics for admin ops folks. And really do appreciate many of you who, when you registered, provided this laundry list of topics that you thought would be great for ones to talk about either on this call, plan for future trainings. So really don't forget about these topics, but we're going to really tackle some ideas of how do we plug in admin ops trainings into current association efforts, employees association efforts, working with partners like DCR, and really this is our kickoff opportunity to discuss those. I don't want you to forget either that retainer hours are available. There's been enough staff turnover that I feel like I mentioned this one and hate to be a broken record, but we have been really privileged to be able to put on retainer Brim and Associates, a CPA, as well as Terry Higgins, our senior HR specialist, for districts to use for any questions that the association can help with, needs to go to a next level. Your personnel questions, please be using Terry. I know she has helped many of you on certain topics. Brim and Associates the same. I have been getting a log from both of them to know general information, how long they've been having those appointments so that we're keeping track of retainer hours available, general topics, so that if three districts, for example, are asking about 1099s or 5 are asking about interview questions, then certainly we've been asking for that kind of information from both of them so we can heighten that topic and bring it to an admin ops committee or a training session. So you'll hear from Terry today a bit later on the agenda about some of the topics she's been talking generally to districts about and how that might help you and other districts, just to hear a bit about it and ensure she's not getting the same question repeatedly. At this time, unless there are questions about retainer hours or any of the upcoming trainings, I'll pause. Feel free to come off mute or use the chat box. I'm gonna actually toss it over for our first speaker. Many of you in your comments for roundtable discussion had alluded to a number of items that are relative to DCR and the Soil and Water Board. They recently had their Soil and Water Board in conjunction with the association's meeting. We piggybacked those together. We recognize the importance of Soil and Water Board actions, activity, their allocation process, their grant agreements, and they're entering the spring sequence of meetings that are really very important and critical to districts, including grant agreement deliverables. The recent board meeting had actions regarding audit findings and other areas. And I guess I'm going to stop there and see if both James is on from DCR and help update admin staff on what some of those board action items are, how that might be of importance and relevance to districts across the state for lessons learned and best practices, and helping James really want to make sure Charles Newton is recognized. He is an audit subcommittee member and member of the Soil and Water Board and is on the call today too. I think it brings a great lift to the topic when you recognize it's not just James speaking to it, but Mr. Newton is a director in Shen Valley that represents Area 1 districts on that board and serves on the audit subcommittee. So hearing a lot from both sides, the agency and the board members itself, and then potentially transition into some of those other topics that have been requested from districts on audit findings overview, desktop guide with your help, Blair. So with that, James, are you on the line to help kick us off?
I am on the line. I'm so sorry. I forgot to pack my camera for my trip out to the Stanton regional office. But I made it to Stanton. I'm here with Angie Ball, our Western area manager. And just thank you for the invitation and opportunity to join you. For those that I haven't met, my name's James Martin. I'm the new division director for Soil and Water. I worked with DCR starting back in '95, and am very happy to be back with the agency after having been with DEQ for several years. And that probably sounded worse than it was. It's not because anything was bad at DEQ, but I am happy to be back at DCR and having the opportunity to work with districts more closely again. So I did want to touch on a couple of the actions that were taken at the board meeting. I think the best way to organize these is maybe touch on the first one, which was not directly related to specific audit findings, but was related to recurring theme across a number of years of audits as well as verification checks and CDC checks. And that was, there was a repeating occurrence of contracts not being fully executed, which means parts 1, 2, and 3 of the VAX contracts having signatures, all appropriate signatures in place. That is what's required to make that document a contract. And without all of those signatures, honestly, the contract should have never been paid because it wasn't a contract. So the board action this year is really just, we hope, a way to draw everyone's attention to the need to make sure those contracts are fully executed. What the board approved on recommendation from the audit subcommittee was to require reimbursement of any contracts found not to be fully executed, of all pages signed by appropriate parties. That will be a reimbursement of both the cost share and TA funding associated with that contract. Or I wish I had my camera so you could see my air quotes, right? It's not a contract, which is why we're asking for reimbursement. So that was the first action. This one, I am confident that we can make sure processes are in place to have all of those contracts signed. So I'm confident that this is one that will never need to be executed. That no reimbursement will ever come into play, right? Because all of you guys out there are going to make sure you've got processes in place to have those documents appropriately signed. So I thank you in advance for that, and I look forward to never having to exercise that authority granted to us by the board. The next ones I'll touch on are 3, and these are direct result of audits. So there were 2 items where districts had previously had problems in their audits, had developed improvement plans, and had not fully implemented or adequately implemented those improvement plans.
So it's,
Then had, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
you got it.
Okay.
SWCD.
If you can mute, please. Thank you. So in those 2 cases, they were PIPs. The PIPs weren't fully implemented. And so we saw the same findings again in the next round of audits. So as an encouragement to those districts to try and correct those audit findings, what the board approved on recommendation of the audit committee was to withhold a percentage of the admin and ops funding for those districts, 25% in one case and 15% in the other, pending appropriate resolution of all of those issues that were identified in their audit and implementation of their improvement plans. If all of that is done and their quarterly and annual reports are all in good order, those withheld admin and ops funds will be returned to those districts in the 4th quarter, either with their 4th quarter distribution or in a separate special distribution. So those I think are important because we wanted to, right, we go through this process of having these audits and it's really important that when the audits find issues that we work diligently to resolve them as quickly as possible. These were cases where that was not happening. So we wanted to provide a little more encouragement to have that happen. And this is really one of the few places where the department through the board has authority to kind of hold back on payments or allocations to a district. So I recognize that it's the first time that we have done this, but in these two cases, it was not just, hey, you had one bad issue on the audit. It was recurring issues on multiple years of audits and failure to implement their PIPs. So that was those. The third case coming out of the audit was for the Robert E. Lee District, and in that case, there were substantial irregularities associated with travel reimbursements to a staff member at that district on the order of 175,000 miles of travel in a personal vehicle over a 2-year period. You know, for those of us that work a 2,080-hour work week, I think the math was approximately 42 miles per hour every hour of that 2,080-hour work week or work year for each of those 2 years is what would be required to log that many miles. In addition, those mileage reimbursements in some cases were made using VAX TA dollars when the purpose of the trip of the travel was for dam inspections. And this was all documented on the reimbursement claims that were collected during the audit. So of the reimbursements that were provided, about $33,000 of those reimbursements were paid out of TA for travel to do dam inspections, which is not authorized. And that was the area where the department and board had authority to require repayment of that $33,000. Now, my perspective is that there is more going on here than just using the wrong pot of funds to pay for travel. If a single employee is spending that much time traveling over a 2-year window, it's a sign to me that there is work that's going undone just because of the amount of windshield time. Or that frankly, there is other malfeasance going on that unfortunately the board doesn't have the authority to oversee, but certainly the district does. And I can tell you that we have turned over the audit findings to the appropriate authorities should they choose to take further investigative actions into potential malfeasance. So that was the third one, and really the saddest case of the three from my perspective, right? We are all stewards of state dollars, and it is incumbent on us to really spend those dollars the best way we can, and to spend them responsibly and to oversee them responsibly. And in all of these cases, I just want to highlight the importance of, you know, correcting any of these small errors that we may be making now that could be compounded when we see a doubling of our cost share program or something like that, right? Unprecedented levels of cost share funding coming down the pike over the next 2 years. So let's try and get all of these little issues, all these little kinks worked out before we're dealing with larger dollar amounts and ending up having small errors turning into big financial issues. So I do want to mention too, in the case of Robert E. Lee, the board did require some additional actions to make sure the board was properly implementing their travel policies. reviewing of that travel policy, I believe was one. The board recommended the district investigate, buying a vehicle instead of reimbursing for personal mileage for the extent of mileage that was driven and reimbursement made. Several vehicles could have been bought and paid for in just those 2 years. So to the district's credit, they have been diligent in trying to address those other recommendations from the board, investigating, following, or refreshing themselves on the travel policies and investigating vehicle purchases. But I think that's really the main things I wanted to cover. I guess Blair or
Charles, I'd love, right before we transition into Blair, if you'd like to add on to any of James's comments. It means a lot you're here as a board member.
Yes, hi, everyone. Excuse me. James has done a great job of summarizing the 3 cases we had this year, but I just wanted to explain that the results of audits come to the Department of Conservation and Recreation, and they in turn refer these things that are serious matters to the audit subcommittee of the Virginia Soil and Water Conservation Board. At present time, that's just our chair of our audit subcommittee, Adam Wilson, from down in the southwest part of Virginia, and myself from up here in the Shenandoah Valley. We're trying to get a 3rd member to join us, but so far have had to wait a little bit. After what the audit subcommittee does is take the referral and information provided by the audit and DCR and explores that with the district to find out what it is that's causing these problems. What are the root causes? And tries to pull information from the directors and the staff to see how they may be able to develop a plan to correct those problems. So the approach we take is not trying to provide blame, but recognizing that there are problems and how can we correct them. This year, the 3 situations that James just described were serious enough that in addition to working out those details with the district on performance improvement, we thought it was wise to bring them to the full board. So the full Soil and Water Conservation Board made the rulings that Mr. Martin just described. The only other thing I'd like to mention is that we have had, over the past several years, DCR and the governor's budget requests have repeatedly asked our Virginia legislature for more funding and help to our soil and water districts to provide the outreach and the technical services that we need to help Virginia's agricultural producers meet the goals set by our Virginia watershed improvement plans. And we believe that the voluntary incentives can accomplish the needed water quality improvement goals, but each of us, directors and staff of soil and water districts and the department employees, all need to be doing our best to show that we can be effective and efficient in the use of this funding provided. We just can't afford to have critics say that we're not up to the task. So that's why it's so important that we not allow any hint of impropriety or misuse of funds, and that might be used to say that we weren't doing a good job. So thank you for your efforts in the districts.
Thank you, Mr. Newton and Mr. Martin, for the update on Soil and Water Board activity. Before I toss it to Blair, any questions to either of them. I'm not sure both can stay on the line the entire time, but recognize we want to offer the chance for any questions before I turn to Blair and see if you can give us some idea of upcoming board actions, allocation process, audit findings, desktop guide. Great. I don't see any in the chat box. If you want to.
Sure. James, did you want deliverables or do you want me to take that?
Blair, you might need to repeat that. We cut out.
Oh, James, I'm sorry. Do you want to handle the upcoming board actions to be aware of, or do you want me to take care of that?
Why don't you cover that, Blair? Thank you.
Oh, okay. As you guys are aware, obviously this is heavy state board meeting season. Our April agenda is getting ready to come out. The board will look to approve the new cost share manual. But then going to the board for the first time will be your admin and ops policy document, your admin and ops grant agreement, your cost share and TA grant agreements. They're going to look funny because we do not have a budget from the General Assembly. So we don't have final numbers to be able to work out of, to be able to work with. So obviously any of the allocations you would see are very draft. Your admin and ops allocations are more consistent since the funding is the same in both the House and the Senate side. But nothing is guaranteed. You have no idea what's going to happen during conferences.
We don't, but we are fairly confident.
Yes,
the additional
it's one of those
3.6
ones
million,
since they're the same on both sides,
right?
we're really safe.
But I recognize the Soil and Water Board can't approve policies until there
Right.
is a budget approved.
And
but
with the cost share being different in the House and the Senate too,
that's a bigger issue.
that's a bigger issue that really affects how we write policy. So you're likely not going to see any finalized numbers or potentially any draft numbers for your cost share and TA yet, because the differences are big enough in the House and the Senate. While both are extremely friendly to us, and it's going to be nice no matter what we get. We can't really, some of those policies are very hard to draft without final budget numbers. And like Kendall said, our board cannot take action on any of it until the budget has been approved. So
Blair,
it is a
is
little
it
challenging.
correct to say, at least for district planning, that we are fairly confident 3.6 million, and we have advocated to DCR to
Mhm.
use the budget template process to help
Yes.
distribute that additional 3.6 million. So some of those allocation information, though very draft, because they can't be approved,
Mhm.
could be discussed. And likewise, while we don't know cost share details, we could at least assume confidence that ag cost share will be fully funded at the needs assessment level in year one.
Yes, those are all very fair statements.
Right.
So you'll see some of that start to come out when the board agenda comes out. I think that looks to get posted in the next week or so. But you'll also see obviously some updates to our grant agreements and grant deliverables. Now, our grant agreements and our grant deliverables are largely staying the same. A few minor tweaks to just some verbiage here and there, but largely the same. The two differences, there are two new deliverables in your admin and ops grant agreements. And those deal with outreach. Outreach to new producers, outreach to small farmers, socially disadvantaged farmers, things like that. We have a lot more money going out the door. We're trying to expand our reach and make sure that we can cover, as many farmers as we can possibly assist with water quality concerns. So one of those outreach deliverables is actually the requirement of hosting a outreach event, like a farm dinner or a field day, somewhere where districts can, have farmers and interested participants come and hear about all the different services the districts have to offer. You can invite your partners to speak at these events. We're asking that the small farm outreach program coordinators be invited to these events from around the state. With our agreement with the Virginia State Small Farm Outreach Program. And the event is really kind of a reintroduction of the district, not just to talk about the VAX program, but to talk about your education programs, your other services to the community, nutrient management that maybe isn't necessarily tied to a BMP contract, but can still be offered to a farmer who maybe doesn't meet the criteria. We've got the VCAP program, all the different things that districts are offering to the community should be highlighted at these types of events. There is a kind of a requirement for how you advertise these events, because we're wanting to make sure that word is expanding, that word's getting out there. Many districts host similar types of events already, not everybody, but many do. So we worked very hard with the associations, the Employees Association's DEI committee. We worked with DCR's DEI committee. We worked with the small farm, I've just lost my words, the VSU small farm program to put these deliverables, to put this deliverable together. So the deliverable itself is about the hosting the program and the type of outreach that you do. And then the second part of that deliverable is that you have invited the small farm outreach program coordinator from your area to participate on the agenda if they so choose. It is not up to you to make sure that they participate, but just that the outreach was there. And that could be something as simple as an email to the small farm outreach program coordinator with a CC to your CDC, just so that we know that the communication was made. It is not up to you or any of us if small farm outreach program does not respond.
So I think that addresses Sharon's question, which I wanted to talk to also, because while I knew this was being developed, I had the same comment to DCR that I know some of you have had trouble connecting with and engaging with your VSU contact. So in reality, in some ways, this could be to our benefit. While I know DCR has heard that, this documents for us if you are struggling with that contact.
Mhm.
If you have invited them, if we have email proof that they have been encouraged to join and they are being unresponsive, then that gives us another leg to
Right.
at least prove to DCR that we need to enhance that partnership further. So your answer to the deliverable is finished. You have invited them. If they chose not to attend, so be it.
Yep.
We can certainly share contact information again for small farm program outreach.
Yes.
I want to also comment, I have talked a little bit about this deliverable with DCR too. Many of you, as Blair mentioned, are already doing this. It could be your, Hannah Caroline does a great barbecue outreach event at Meadow Event Park. Some of you have farm breakfast. One of you has done a virtual training session opportunity for partners to come together. There's nothing in this that would make me think a virtual event wouldn't actually qualify for this type of criteria to meet your grant deliverable. So I think there are ways that this just helps further document and ensure we're bringing new folks to the table for DCR, but certainly appreciate having been a part of the conversation as y'all started working through the outreach component of this grant deliverable and bringing in our DEI committee.
Yes, it was really great to work with the DEI committee on putting together some of this. They were very helpful with good feedback. So thank you to those who were all a part of that. The specific language for those grant deliverables are obviously not up on the screen today, but they will be sent out with the when the board meeting materials are released, which you can always find on the town hall website, by the way.
We'll be glad to do. In years past, I've usually taken, as we head into April and May's meeting,
Yeah.
the draft grant agreements, the allocation amounts, the
Mhm.
details from those and shared with our admin listserv. I'm happy to do that again and seek any feedback just to ensure that as I attend those meetings, I have certainly an understanding of district concerns or voice.
But outside of, as far as your grant deliverables are concerned, the outreach deliverables are the two biggest changes. Again, everything else largely stays the same with the minor word tweak here and there. So nothing to be concerned with. I don't think there'll be anything that'll change how districts are currently operating. So.
Blair, can we talk further about allocations? I know Mr. Newton and all has reiterated, as did you, the idea of the additional $3.6 million. And in terms of what that could mean for allocations. I believe I'm correct in saying DCR will be using budget template like we've advocated to help
Mhm.
allocate those additional dollars to districts.
Yes.
I also know from having participated in the peer review process and in budget template that many districts need to think harder about the budget template process. If there are a handful of districts from data I've reviewed that are requesting less than they currently receive,
Mhm.
to make sure that you are actually encompassing your actual need, that if you don't offer healthcare coverage, for example, that you are including that in a budget template request. You're not basing it on what you currently have, but where you need to be to remain competitive, and salary comparables, all things that we've been trying to plug in area meetings too.
Yes, and we did notice in some during this exercise, where some districts did actually maybe inadvertently say they could use less operational money. And of course, we're not going to give them less, but it was noted, and you will see that kind of noted in the charts that come out for the board packets. But
If I can add to that, thank you. I apologize for
Yes.
interrupting so much. We advocated and asked that while they considered their allocations, that they hold districts level if
Mhm.
they requested less than what they were currently receiving. But from my understanding, that does not mean moving forward, that will be the case, that you have been given potentially a 1-year grace period to do your due diligence to look at your budget template and ensure that number is correct next year. So that level funding may not be.
yeah,
forever.
during the development of the attachment D from the infamous summer study group of 2012, it was emphasized then that this would eventually become how we set district budgets, that this will be the tool that we use. And that was what came out of the summer SAG that helped to develop this. It's come from district comments over the years that this is a tool that will be highly, highly utilized and relied upon as we move forward, especially as we start seeing our funding needs actually met by General Assembly budgets. So it's going to be more critical than ever that we really spend a lot of time and focus on the attachment D process when that time comes. It will continue to be a every other year process. So we will not have another process until you have a reprieve from the process this year. We will do the process again next year to estimate fiscal year 2025 budget numbers and resetting those admin ops numbers and your base technical assistance. So it will in 2025, for that 2025 program year, become even more critical. And we will, of course, do more training, and we will be doing more updates, and we're going to continue to make it a better, as best of a tool as we can, but to make it, we're going to continue to do trainings on it when the exercise comes up as well, because we want to make sure that everybody fills it out to the best of their abilities and to the best of their advantages.
I think that answers Keith's question. Just to emphasize the answer, you would not be anticipating a completion this spring, but
Right.
next spring at this point. So your last attachment D submission would be the one used for allocations.
Yes, the one that you submitted at the end of this past program year, at the end of program year 2021 is the one that is being used for setting fiscal year 2023 numbers. And then again, we have a little bit of a reprieve, so.
And then you have a couple other questions that I think we can kind of address if we haven't. Will we be able to adjust attachment D if costs go up? For instance, rent, lease, that opportunity is next spring.
Yes, that opportunity will be every other spring to adjust for that. And I think that is something that folks do need to take into consideration. And we're seeing that more now than we have in the past, obviously, with real estate prices going up and everything too. And even if you're, receiving some in-kind space, taking into consideration if any of that situation could potentially change.
Excellent. There's some questions about the outreach deliverable. Will there be a specific dollar amount provided to districts to host an event? This is an additional grant agreement deliverable, but there's no additional funding. You should be marketing the VAX program. DCR is now just including a bit more of a directive on how they
Yes.
would like you to ensure you're marketing the program.
Right, and there is also, and there's another question too about conduct some effective outreach trainings that has been it is on the list. We're also looking in and working with our PCMO department, our public relations department, to help provide some materials for districts as well, maybe some. So we've done it on and off over the last couple of years, some really good images for social media. We've written some radio scripts over the years that folks can use for local radio stations. We've helped draft some press releases and things like that. So I'm talking with our PCO department, even, actively right now about what we can help provide to districts to conduct outreach as well.
The next question I think is a really great one from Deanna. If they host an outreach event in June of this year, say late June, to really market the July 1 program,
Yes.
can they count that for their program year 23, even though the date is?
Yes, I would count that.
Hey, Kendall, James here. I just want to jump in on the idea of effective outreach training. And I guess I just turn it around and ask districts. I mean, you guys are the ones that have been marketing these programs for years. Are there districts that feel you're very effective at doing that? And do you have best practices that could be shared?
Absolutely.
I don't think DCR is always the place to look for the best answers. I think often it is among your own peers that you may find the best information. So maybe an opportunity to share best practices amongst yourselves might be as effective as anything DCR might be able to offer. But
Absolutely,
As Blair
James.
said.
And in my mind, I was thinking of a training session that is almost like a share session, a share group amongst districts, because you guys are the boots on the ground. You guys are the ones that know the community best and how to reach out to these farmers. So it absolutely comes from you. So any feedback you can even provide for us of like, hey, this type of flyer would be really useful to have in our territory. Can you help us put something together? Like we might actually be able to, we already have something possibly already drafted up that you could use, or we may be able to say, well, this might be useful around the state. Let's put together a flyer where you can add in your information. Or, there's lots of things, lots of different ways that you guys communicate with your farmers currently about sign up, and you're already sending out information about some of your farmer cookouts that you're doing already, things like that. What is working for you? And so when I envision a training about effective outreach, I definitely envision a large sharing session amongst groups, because you guys know the community better than anybody, and we really rely on you for that.
Through a few of the comments in the chat, Kathleen, your points are spot on, and I appreciate them. Kathleen, you want to add to that?
Yeah, thank you. So I am on the DEI committee, and I don't know how many other members are on the committee that's on here now, but that's some of the things that we're talking about, is having some effective training. And I personally don't believe that districts don't do outreach because they don't want to. I believe that they just don't really know how to. And we had a session at Grays Mountain with the small outreach farmers that was there, and we had a lot of discussion. And during that session, it was evident that people had no idea how to reach out to other people in their watershed that they don't deal with on a regular basis. So that is some training that, of course, from peer to peer, we could possibly do. But if DCR is requiring us to do something in a deliverable, they should provide some type of training, maybe an outside speaker on DEI, like we had at Grays Mountain, would be very good. But, something of that sort. But I think that it is needed, and I'm glad that it's in a deliverable, and now we need to know how to deliver it.
Excellent. I do I appreciate your comments, Kathleen. They're spot on. I see Deanna's also in the chat box of sharing ideas, having a process to do that would be
Sooner
really
rather than
beneficial. And the second comment is really spot on, that it is time is of the essence. We need that sooner than later as they begin planning for the next program year.
Yep.
So I am jotting down in this area where your roundtable topics are to add this idea of some type of outreach training, even share session. Marketing committee might be able to really play a role in this too. They've certainly developed their annual plan of work, but this folds right into it. They've
It
met
does,
with
yeah.
the new Julie Buchanan, Rebecca in their office. They've started talking about things that might be helpful as we enter a new program year. There's such overlap between committee work right now that we're all aiming for the same end goal to help districts move forward with programs and work. So certainly marketing committee can help be a lead on this and gives them a training opportunity, but want to make sure we're tapping into anyone who wants to be engaged and involved. So fitting for us to discuss in this format too.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so that pretty much covers the grant agreements, upcoming board actions. We'll get a little bit more into some desktop stuff here in a minute. Any other questions about upcoming state board meetings? Process is pretty normal this year, minus the budget.
Minus the budget.
Minus the budget. So look for those documents. They'll be released in the near future. Kindle has shared them over time as well. They're also always posted to the town hall website. If you don't already get alert for that website, you can log in to, what is it, like townhall.virginia.gov, and you can set alerts. You can sign up and get alerts anytime meeting minutes are posted for the audit subcommittee, the state soil and water board, regular meetings as well. So they will send you email alerts when documents go up. Always a good place to look for information.
Blair, can I ask a question? This is Deanna.
Yeah, please.
On the budget
Good.
template, and you said you were going to, or DCR was going to utilize those for this additional admin ops money. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes.
So are you going, is
One
DCR
district.
going to take a look at, use the budget template on the base general funds or the increased funding columns, or both?
Right now, it is being calculated off the base general funds, as that is where we are. It'll all depend on how the budgets flesh out to some degree. So for your operations funding, it is being based on the base money right now, because that is where the money from the budget language is meeting. Does that make sense? The language in the current budget meets the base funding for operations.
Okay, so when we were.
So that one's being based on the base allocations for the operational funding, where for this year was the first year we gave you guys the opportunity to have an increased funding level, but the money in the General Assembly budget wasn't at that high of a level yet.
But our cost share dollars that we were given to complete the budget template,
Yes.
the level funding is probably, but well, I'm just looking at mine. It's probably going to be a lot less than what we will
Yes.
actually receive. So,
So
it
the cost
might-
share is different. Yeah, the cost share is a different beast.
well, yeah, but when we filled out the budget template, our admin ops workload was based on those levels of cost share that we were given. So I just am saying that it's possible the base general funds that we, for admin ops, that we indicated we needed on the budget template may not coincide with the big increase in cost share fund.
Right. But your big increase in cost share does come with significant increase in technical assistance as well. And I know that's not always the ideal answer, because it is not the guaranteed source, because it does ebb and flow with cost share years. But that is what is kind of accounting for that large increase in cost share at this moment. Now, again, the cost share numbers are a whole different beast.
That's gonna change significantly, right? The
It's-
non-point source
The
assessment.
non-point source assessment changed this year, so your high, medium, and low hydrologic units are different this year. And so there are some big changes happening to allocations.
But at least on the cost share side, there is still 4.55 for base TA to be allocated.
Yes, yes. So cost share is taking more finagling, if you will.
Sure.
It's not a straight, calculation. And it hasn't been forever, but it's not a straight calculation. So, and again, those numbers are still being finagled and of course will alter with whatever comes out of the General Assembly. So,
Okay, thank you.
yes. That wasn't the best answer, but
No, that's helpful. And this has been really good conversation. I'm gonna keep us moving because I know
yeah, we've got a
have
lot
hard
to
stop at,
cover.
Right, 3 o'clock we've got just about another hour that we can talk. So did you want to talk top guide?
Yeah, well, let me go back to James's comments about the audits for just a minute.
Good point.
You did have the general audit letter come out from both the Soil and Water Board, the audit subcommittee of the Soil and Water Board, and from Robinson, Farmer and Cox. I just want to make sure you guys pay attention to what those little comments are coming in that general management letter. A lot of these comments about the use of the transfer in and out column on the attachment E, credit card receipts, itemized invoices, that is itemized invoices, including like dinners for your boards and in cost share files, and the unnecessary paying of sales tax. Those are issues we have been repeating over and over and over again in all of these general management letters for like the last 5 years. So keep in mind that those are the little things that like we're still picking up on, that yes, they're not necessarily making you come to the audit subcommittee for that, but like if we consistently continue to see some of this stuff, it's going to start cracking down. So just make sure, you're tighten stuff up a little bit. Overall, everyone's doing a really great job. Like we're not, having any major heartburn over stuff. As James mentioned, the signing of the contracts, that really has a lot to do with some of these practices with variances allowed are reaching sky high amounts of cost share. And it really affects our ability to even have authority to go on to do verifications onto those farms, to do verifications and things like that as well. So those contract signatures are absolutely critical. But again, don't lose sight of some of these smaller things as we are getting, more funding, we're getting more scrutiny. So just keeping up with those. Any of the comments that were done in your exit interview, definitely, make every effort to clean those up and make sure your policies, review your policies and make sure you have steps in place, because, it may have just been a minor comment this time, but if we see it again and it's the same exact comment that we saw last time, like it may, cause us to call you to the audit subcommittee, even for something kind of small. We don't want to have to do that. It's no fun. So just keep in mind that, these letters go out. We are waiting on just one last, representation letter from Robinson, Farmer and Cox before they can release the final audit results. So if you were audited this year, you have not received your final financial audit report yet. I will be sending those out as soon as Robinson, Farmer and Cox gets those to me. I will make sure everybody gets their final copies. We've only done electronic copies for the last couple of years. We are continuing with only electronic copies. But I will get those to you as soon as I have them from Robinson, Farmer and Cox. Hopefully that will be very soon. I was just speaking with them the other day. So that should be any moment now. Desktop guide. So this is the year we didn't do any updates last year. We're going to try to continue an every other year update cycle for the desktop guide. We want to give people a chance to actually implement things that are in it before changing it again. So As you guys noticed, the desktop financial guide, we sent it out a few weeks ago to all of the admin staff and district managers, and we also sent it all district to directors. Thank you to those who commented back. I received a number of comments back. Largely everybody very appreciative of the reorganization. And Deanna's on this call, and I have to give her a big shout out, and that Deanna was pretty much the brainchild of kind of how this reorganization took shape. So thank you to Deanna for your time helping us kind of figure out a more user-friendly format in reordering where some of this information better fits. We've been kind of piecemealing it together for the last 10 years, it feels like. So thank you to Deanna for helping us through that. A lot of comments about the reorganization and the flow of information being much better. The only two changes we have made since the draft went out is that one of the comments from the auditors was about a new IRS notice that came, a new IRS rule that came up a year or two ago with reimbursing employees for travel expenses within 60 days. And some of that is on the employee to get you the proper documentation timely, but a lot of districts actually came back to us and asked if we could put that also as applicable for directors. You know, most of our expenditure policies apply to both directors and staff. And with the number of comments I got back from districts asking for that to apply to both employees and directors, we went ahead and just changed that rule to say, instead of employees, it says all employees and directors must be reimbursed within 60 days of incurring the expense. So that is one of the changes that came out of the feedback from the districts. And then let me think. We are going to be adding some sample telework policies and telework logs at the end. It was something that I needed to get together and just hadn't had a chance to do that before we got it sent out to you guys. So we do have some sample telework policies to throw into the appendix as well. And I think outside of that, those are the only additional changes to the desktop guide from what was sent out initially. Does anyone have any comments or questions or any discussion they want to have about the desktop guide? Otherwise, I'm not going to walk through all the comments. Again, it's largely just organizational. So. Okay. Good. Other agency updates. Obviously, you know, most of you are well aware that we have a number of vacancies at the agency. We are still down 2 CDCs, one in our Abington office and one in our Suffolk office, and we are down an Ag BMP Incentives Program Manager. Recruitment for those is well underway. Believe the CDC positions have both closed and applicants are being screened. The Ag BMP Incentives Program Manager position is moving forward. And in the meantime, for those in the Abington office, they still contact Angie Ball for all of their CDC needs. And in the Suffolk office, Amy Walker and myself are kind of tag teaming the CDC responsibilities as needed and helping you guys stay covered. So anything you need, you know where to find us. But that is all moving forward, at least. So we'll eventually get fully staffed. I think that's it from me, unless anybody has any questions for me. I'm happy to answer them as they come in. I'll be hanging out for a little bit longer before I have to leave. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Blair. Well, we're going to move right along. Terry Higgins is joining us today virtually, and she's been working with a number of districts that have been utilizing the retained hours, and she's going to talk to you about some upcoming projects that she's going to be working on. Terry?
First have to unmute me.
One
thing that you see just popped up on your screen is a summary of the kinds of topics that folks have reached out to me for. So you'll see, I kind of put them in a general category and then a little bit more about them. That's so you have an idea. Pretty much anything you need help with, feel free to give me a call. There are some trends in there that we'll look at, for future training and additional information, whether it's through the newsletter or training sessions or whatever. One real important thing is to make sure that folks know how to reach me, because now I am permanently a work from home employee. So if you reach out to me, if you need to reach me for any reason, some of my contact information's changed. And the email is probably the best way. And then also the cell phone number. So I'm going to give you guys both that, and so that everybody has it. And then you'll see it in other materials and of course in the directory and everything. But the email address is HIG11, so it looks like HIG11 @henrico.us. And then my cell phone number that you need to call is 804-307-0084. And I do have message on that, and I do check those messages. Since I'm now a permanent work from home employee, or at least permanent for the time being, I'm on a lot of these Zoom and WebEx and team chat calls, all this virtual meetings. So if I don't get to you right away on the phone, please leave a message and I will get back to you. And if you don't hear from me by like the next day, give me another shout out. Because I do, our little division is just me and Tam, and we get a lot dropped in our laps, especially last minute questions or hot topics and things. So make sure that I don't lose track of you. And you'll notice when you look through the topics, you'll see where I did drop the ball on 2 things. So please make sure you reach back out. It's not bothering me at all. It's just helping me juggle. So that was 2 really important things I wanted to share, was my email and my cell phone number. Some of the things you'll notice that are trending in there are really kind of umbrellaed under things like personnel issues that we've helped districts work with, whether it's documentation, whether it's how to have a conversation, what are some options for performance improvement, or, have we reached the end of the line? Is it really better for us to go our separate ways with an employee? Those kinds of things, as well as compensation. And compensation's been interesting. I've got questions on what are the different types of structures. Can you assist with a salary survey so we know if we're competitive in our area? And even one on pay parity, and how would that impact the districts, and how do we determine that? So we'll definitely be sharing more information around those. But kind of one really big news item around that is Kendall has also gotten a lot of feedback about compensation. And so one of the things we kind of worked together on a plan earlier today was, what could that look like that we could share some compensation data for you guys that didn't make you uncomfortable in sharing, because we are small, we do know each other and all of that. So we've kind of looked at like a 2 or 3 prong approach. I guess really a 3-prong approach, if I remember correctly. First is we'll go ahead and create a lot of the actual data that's readily available to folks that comes from what are called benchmark employers, that comes from the federal government. And we have to supply that data sometimes on a monthly basis, like Henrico is a monthly supplier of that data, Henrico County, and sometimes on a quarterly basis. So I can pull all of that data and show you what that looks like. That's actual, what is considered reliable data, because it actually comes from employers across all sectors in a given metropolitan or non-metropolitan area. So, and that breaks down pretty well to how we can share and pair that data to our different areas and districts. So that'd be the first thing you'd see, is just kind of broad stroke data. And then what we were thinking was, if we could get interest from and participation from the districts would be to request you share data about what you're, just by classification, like district manager, conservation specialist, admin assistant, those kinds of things, what the current salary is for each of those. And then what I would do is, so that you don't feel on the spot, or you guys can be pegged for particular salaries, what I would do with that is adopt that into what's called a quartile model of reporting. And that's where we would take in the nutshell version. Easiest way to explain that would be, we would lay out, if an area had like 6 different districts reporting, we would report all of them pay more than this amount, and 90% pay more than this amount, 10% pay more than that amount. We give you the median. So you could see how, kind of what the different quartiles of pay are. And that sounds kind of nebulous, but it actually is very helpful data. And I'll get you, when you see the first more generic data from the BLS, you'll get a feel for what that looks like. And the other thing we wanted to capture was related to benefits. What benefits do the districts offer? And we can, there's really a couple ways we could do that. We could just send out a request like we would for the salary data. We could send it out at the same time and just ask you to provide all your benefits that you offer. Or we could just, when we request the salary data, I could send out a checklist and you could just check box and send it back, what your district provides. So we'll work through how to make those responses as easy as possible so that we can get you back the best possible data on what's called total compensation, which is pay and benefits, which would include things like perks, because some of the things that have come up with not only district questions, but the workforce at large, and I'm sure everybody's heard about the Great Resignation and what the changing new norms, the changing workplace model is really when they're surveying exiting employees and current employees, what are getting them to leave and to stay has really shifted a little bit. The top ones are workplace flexibility, so the hybrid work. Most folks want a bit of time in the office, but they want more flexibility about being able to work offsite from home, basically. Another big one is their workplace, and that it would include the culture as well as their coworkers. When they're coming back into the workplace, they're a lot less willing to put up with what's being termed toxic coworkers and toxic managers. So folks that have behaviors that are challenging. So that's a real big driver. Those are the 2 big ones: workplace flexibility with a hybrid work model, and what does my workplace look like when I'm in the workplace. And then what's come up behind that pretty consistently in the top 5, hanging around number 3 generally, is fair pay. So folks are interested, not necessarily am I making the most, but am I being paid fairly, like for my area as well as, within my workspace or workplace. So those are the 3 real big ones that this could help you with. And we've gotten lots of questions around, so that'll be something you'll see show up in either training or newsletters. Some of that information. Let's see, a lot of information about policy guidance and evaluations, because it's that time of year, and good documentation. That's come up a number of times. Then the other big thing, did I miss anything, Kendall? I think I missed something.
No, I guess before you head into maybe the personnel manual discussion and topics for revision, I'd welcome any comments from districts. If this was overwhelming a topic of conversation when it comes to salary comparables, of you calling and asking for it of recent just for your own district, or overwhelming in terms of the number of folks who put it in the registration question when you registered for the Zoom session of salary comparables, health insurance, salary ladders for upward advancement, employee retention, bonuses, that I would love your input and feedback to Terry as we navigate doing something of this caliber. Is this something you want? I don't want us to feel like we're pushing it on you, but am I reading you correctly that it would be helpful? And are we hitting some of the points that you might want to see in something that is done?
Kendall and Terry, this is Keith at Monacan. One of the biggest things is that when people look at salaries, they've also got to be looking at job descriptions. Because an administrative person that does not handle the financials is going to be paid totally different than somebody that handles the financial and the minutes and the, you know, the Library of Virginia representative and the FOIA officer. So just when other staffs and districts are looking at salaries, look at responsibilities as well. Consider those.
And
Excellent.
that's an excellent point. That when we send out the request for the data, we'll list out the classifications that we're kind of targeting and then what those duties include, because it does need to be duty-based. You should not ever be making decisions just based on job titles, because like Keith just said, you know, an office assistant can vary widely from somebody who just meet and greets and does some processing in mail versus, you know, an office support that does database management and, you know, lots of finances, you know, reviews, say payments to cost share participants and things like that. So you'll see when we send out the request for the data that we will include, here are the categories that we found, and here's what we're thinking along the job duty line. And if you have something different, feel free to share it or reach out if there's something you want to make sure that gets included that I might not have thought of. I could think of 5 and they seem to match what Kendall had done previously, but like Blair said earlier, you guys are boots on the ground and you know better how your folks are being utilized. So anything that we can get in advance to help you guys decide, you know, just plug a salary next to, you know, this title, because it matches these duties.
Excellent point.
That was excellent, because that's something, having done this for so many years, I kind of forget is part of the process because it's automatic to me.
Oh, and Terry, you've got a couple points in the chat box too. To Sharon's point, a great starting point for districts to cross compare is with the state of Virginia. And James and I met yesterday and actually spoke about some of that data that might be of help. I certainly have some data and have shared with many of you from districts, but that data is about 2 years old now. And I recognize I am very hesitant when sharing when folks have started asking for it. So think the legwork Terry will be able to do to provide us something stronger in time for our June admin ops meeting could be really very valuable, and we'll certainly take into consideration and try to get that data from James too about cross comparing with state of Virginia also.
Yeah, thanks, Kendall. At DCR, they recently completed a salary study. So, you know, in a way, we should have half of the equation already available for you and fairly current. And good to hear that you think working in state job role terms is useful, because I presume that that's how they have it laid out. So I'll share that as soon as I can get it from HR.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's how the state has it. That's how all of the federal data that's employer sourced is also broken down. It's by job description, job roles.
Okay.
That's
Sharon, this
your only valid way to make sure that you're apples to apples and not apples and oranges.
I certainly will be touching base with some of you in terms of, I know you've got some local salary studies that are happening that might be of value as we pursue this with Terry. Also, perhaps there's some comparatives to NRCS that was dropped into the chat box. Perhaps some of that might be captured in some of the data that Terry said she would do for BLS data and all too, but certainly can navigate the NRCS level 2 if necessary. I see, Sharon, your point too of I would like to know how the state of Virginia provides step increases within each salary grade scale. And that might be something that let's get the salary comparable component first and then dive deeper into the benefits and to step scales and all, but we've got to find a starting point. And it sounds like we can really go a long ways with this to give districts information they need. So saving
Yeah,
the chat box, recording to help us all. Sorry, Terry.
Oh, that's okay. One thing, once we have our kind of broad strokes about where our salaries kind of need to fall, then we can really dive into whether it's training or newsletters or whatever. Here are the models that you can apply. Here's how they work. That's something I covered in like 30 minutes and was really helpful for one of our districts, just to explain what the difference between salary ranges were, pay bands were, step plans were, and it can really be explained pretty simply in 30 minutes. I mean, if they want to share what their feedback was, if they're online, I can't see everybody who's online, but that would be your second step. Once we've got your total comp picture painted for you, then then the next step is, how do I apply it to my district? And that's when we would want definitely to teach you about step plans, pay bands, career development, how you can layer any of those things on top of that to manage your compensation.
This is excellent. I had mentioned tentatively that June 22nd in the afternoon at 1 o'clock is when we would hope to hold our next admin ops training. Our plan with Terry, after she and I discussed this morning, is that it is ambitious, but for her to have collected this information and tried to have something ready to present in terms of a study on that June 22nd, 1 o'clock PM meeting that we have. To James's point, unlike federal pay bands, state pay bands do not have step increases. When the GA approves the cost of living increase, state employees get an increase. If they don't, we don't. So really good points that I think we'll want to fold into. Once we get the data on June 22nd, we'll ask Terry to come and present it to us in that aggregate form that could really be beneficial for all, but we'll start exploring what are the next steps on how to apply it to my district, the step increases, the pay scale efforts, and fold in things like James just dropped into the chat box.
Yeah, exactly. Does everybody feel comfortable with the vision for that, so that no one feels singled out? You have good data for your area.
Terry, would you send out maybe an email to the group, just kind of like reminding them what information you need from them?
Yeah, and then
Okay.
that's when I was going to include the job descriptions that we talked about, or the job titles with the descriptions that we talked about this morning. And then I'd been thinking about the easiest way to collect the benefits information, so you can see a total comp package. And I think just a form, kind of a checklist form, would be the easiest. So yeah, that'll definitely all be in an email, Suze.
Okay.
If you have any concerns about sharing this data in this form, I'm hoping that by using Terry, a third party, and letting her aggregate this information so it's beneficial to all, it's a little less sensitive, but certainly gets to the point all districts can benefit from. But my phone is always here. Pick up the phone and give me a ring if you have any aha moments or questions about us pursuing this. And yes, this would be going to all districts, not just those who typically participate in admin ops. So certainly we'll try to caveat it, and you'll be getting the email to the admin listserv, but our admin listserv includes someone from every district itself. So while I have typically replied sometimes to just those who have joined this meeting with the recording, if you are using SWCD admin at vaswcd.org, you are actually connecting with someone from every soil and water district, and that's who this request would go out to. I would work with Terry to make sure that came from her or me, but that the data would be reported and sent back to her.
Yeah, and it won't be shared in that detail at the district level at any point. And my number, the cell phone number I gave you, feel free to call me at any hour if you need me. Things happen at different hours of the day. I tend to work whenever I have time to work. So, and I'm a night owl. So feel free to call whenever you need help, whenever I can be helpful. Let's see, the next thing would really be, next big project would really be personnel policies. And what I tried to do was come up with something that was easy to manage. And it sounds like Deanna did that as well with the ops manual. So what I've done basically is come up with a chart. And I know we have districts who are fully appreciative of the benefits of personnel policies, and others that are, you know, we've always done business this way. We're okay, we don't need them. So just to give everybody, you know, a level playing field of, is it important? Is it required? Is it a best practice? Why is it required, or why is it a best practice required by? And then for folks that want to go into, want something a little more abbreviated for greater flexibility, I'm going to include short policies here right in the document so that you can see what the minimum needs to be. So the abbreviated policy option would be the minimum that a district would need to include. And then if you guys remember, and I didn't remember, it was from 2014, it does not feel that long ago to me, but we did a really great job with collection of policies and practices and in our previous personnel manual that we handed out at an annual report. And I want to go back and pull some of that in, update it. And if you guys are willing to send me any of your policies that you have, any of your personnel manual handbooks that you have, personnel policies, those would be great, because what I'd like to do is be able to use what you've got that already works and plug that into the last column and list it out. Like, this is a detailed policy from Lord Fairfax, or this is a general policy, general scope, covers general scope from Loudon. And so that you can see who the samples are from in case one's more relevant to you than another. And then what we'll have is this chart that will have links then to PDF documents where you can go right to a set of documents on a particular policy. And you don't have to go through a whole bunch of documents or a whole lot of scrolling or anything. So I'll match our existing up and update it. But then you guys have done such a great job with our newer policies like teleworking, flexible scheduling. So if you want to send those in, no sense in reinventing the wheel. I've read some really good ones. So if you guys don't mind, just go ahead and email me all you got. We'll be happy to sort through it all. It's my idea of a good time, especially late at night. In addition to that is I kind of wanted to separate the practices from the policies so that it's a little bit less cumbersome. And so I wanted to go by the chart and the links to actual policies to build personnel handbook. But then there's a lot of questions I've been getting about processes and practices. And so I thought what would be really good would be to also use these policies and our umbrella topics from our previous to give you best practices and forms and things on, if you don't recruit very often, here's a best practice. This is the way you should be doing your recruiting. This is what should be included in interviews. This is the documentation for challenging employees. I've seen some really good performance appraisals. One that was really brief that I just did that we updated that I really liked, that could be very beneficial and easy for districts to adopt and use. So the disciplinary process, what a termination process looks like, whether it's voluntary or involuntary. So some of those processes on the best way to handle them, especially when they don't come up all the time, or somebody's not as familiar with, say, doing an effective performance appraisal, those kinds of things. So that way you've got kind of different sets of documents, but you can really target really easily through clicks and links to exactly what you're looking for. That was my idea. What do you guys think of that? Do you think that's manageable, workable, helpful? I mean, I know it's workable from my side because I have the vision for it, but do you think that's going to be beneficial or helpful?
Yes, absolutely. Radio silence is no fun. I think it's
I
great.
know.
Thank you. And the sooner than later, because we're probably all on the verge of recruiting and doing reviews. And I know you have a lot on your plate, but those are definitely all going to be timely for us. So thank you.
Okay, good.
And I appreciate that comment too. We talked with Terry this morning about the timeliness and how all of this is better sooner than later. Am I correct to prioritize for Terry the salary comparables study between May and June? And then for our plan, really thought of having her then tackle this personnel management manual update. She mentioned and referenced, I showed on the screen, the link to the one that was created back in 2014. That's still very relevant, but certainly some of that is dated in terms of examples and samples. Updating that in time for us to have a summer, fall training and opportunity in December at our in-person annual conference to really be able to hand you something, much like we did for that first personnel manual, as your district gift, and to say, here's a bound copy of an update to a personnel resource manual. If my priorities are wrong and we should switch the order for Terry's focus and work on personnel manual first over salary comparables, I want y'all to speak up now too.
I would say it might be a little bit of both, and I know that's not the right answer, but like, for instance, if we all have performance reviews due before the end of June, maybe just a piece of the personnel manual or the policy manual kind of portion could, you know, the one Terry said she just had a sample of it that she really liked. If maybe it was a teaser for us, or at least something, and not waiting for the whole entire package to come out, that might be helpful. I realize the salaries is obviously very complex to figure out. Most of us are probably going to be analyzing that between now and the end of May. So it is going to be great to get it in June, but the train may have already left the station. So
I agree.
That's really helpful, Deanna. I get timing is of the essence on all of it. And I know that first personnel management manual took a year to develop. So I recognize all of it is going to be time consuming, but at least want to try to ensure as we push the train forward that we're still kind of hitting a time frame that would be a benefit to districts.
And another kind of, I guess, priority that kind of goes along with that, if folks are going to be hiring, you know, at the beginning of this program year or now, any kind of new guidance on hiring practices, hiring forms, any new laws, that would be important instead of waiting until December.
yeah, and I hate to thought of having to piecemeal it for Terry's sake, but it may be that, like Deanna's point and my point is that maybe that we could, I don't know whether Terry, you want to do a mini survey and everybody can kind of rank, you know, quickly out of the entire manual, which pieces would be most important, you know, before the end of, you know, May or June or whatever timing is. And if just one or two of those sections could come out, and again, not wait all the way till December for the whole thing.
Keep in mind, I guess I want to make sure I clarify. In December, I might be giving you a hard copy and you might be having a work session. We talked with Terry this morning in September, October, doing an actual virtual training because this manual would be completed. I would have to have it to go to print in October for me to give you a hard copy and refresh and talk about it at annual meeting. But we could potentially have it done by September, October to do a training with.
And the good news is we really aren't reinventing the wheel, so it's not going to take nearly as long. If we find that recruitment and hiring and evaluations are key, I can certainly target those and we could do them like our little newsletter blasts so that you have the information more quickly, because we haven't done those for a while.
I think that's a good idea, Terry. That was my point is
Okay.
September. I think Deanna's point is that we will have already probably recruited and started our hiring in, you know, by June, July, August.
Okay.
Terry, one of the
Performance
things,
reviews are due in June.
Terry, Kendall and I were just talking, and since, you know, some of these things are timely, would you have a date maybe in May that we could maybe have a short, like a committee meeting that's focused really on these roundtable items that came up, but also these pieces that people might have questions about as they're getting ready to do the hiring?
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
I think Susie makes a really good point too. We're pressing up against 2:30, and I knew this was an ambitious agenda anyway. But if we don't get to all of those roundtable topics on the agenda, I would love to see, is there an hour in May before that June 22nd meeting where we're going to have Terry come present the comparable for salary details, that perhaps this group just gets back together and has no other agenda except let's talk about these topics that you've brought to the table and have questions about, and really have no other structured point on an agenda. And that might be an opportunity for us to touch base midpoint way with Terry on salary and other details in terms of progress.
And that way it would be timely as you all are getting ready to start your hiring process.
Time wise, what are you guys thinking for hiring? When would you want to be starting that? And when would you want to be starting evaluations? I know May and June, but I didn't write down which was which.
Well, performance reviews are required to be completed before June 30th. So, and then I would say that recruitment's going to be a little bit more varied, but
Districts do performance evaluations at different times. We have some that do them in December and do pay raises in like January 1 for tax purposes. We have others that do it in April and some that do them in June. So it's all over the board, truthfully, with personnel evaluations. But they are a grant deliverable that they have to be done every year.
And don't forget, you have retainer hours. If you have specific questions that you want to
Oh,
be
yeah.
tapping into Terry, rather than thinking I'm just going to get it out of the personnel manual once it's published. Keith, I know you've had your hand up for a while. I apologize.
That's okay. I'm used to it. That's what it was. Anyhow, what I was going to say was we've got to remember directors need to be trained on personnel management and good hiring practices.
Yes.
I think that's led to a lot of the current personnel issues across the state. Salaries are important, but if you do a good job of hiring, then I think you can tell your current staff, look, we're getting to that. We're working on that. But directors have got to have the training to resolve some of these personnel issues.
Yeah, and
That's
Keith,
a
you
great
hit on
point.
a topic that's been hot on our minds in this room too. We were talking about a little bit this morning, you know, the HR training needs of directors and hiring and how to hire and how to do employee evaluations and things like that were all things that came up on the table.
Maybe that's like Mm-hmm.
I do think if there's interest, Susie, we can certainly tackle,
Okay.
you know, updates and topics in a May, June, some type of hour Zoom session with folks before June 22nd.
Do you want me to
Would
go
most
into-
of the hiring be,
Go ahead.
would the practice start in May, June timeline to bring somebody on board for July 1? Is that what you're thinking? Is that pretty accurate? I mean, it seems to me to be logical, but is that what would occur? That's, it's.
I'm gonna leave that to someone better than me to. All right.
I'll work on the newsletter blasts and we'll try to get those blasted out. And then please feel free to use the hours. You're not limited. We're making good utilization of those. So don't feel limited. But if you've already talked to me a lot, just keep on talking to me a lot. I'm here to help, even it beyond the scope of the retainers. So don't worry about that. I'll work with Kendall to get out blasts on evaluations and hiring practices as soon as possible, and then we can figure out if there's additional need at just the director level or what else we need to do for training practices.
And Terry, I'll reach out to you. We'll coordinate with Kendall about a date like mid-May to have an hour or so just to talk about the roundtable items and any last minute things that have came up for districts that are getting ready to hire.
Yeah, that sounds great.
20 minutes left if you want to tackle annual plan of work.
All right. So because of time, we're going to move on to the annual plan of work. I believe that was in your email that you got from Kendall. We kind of went over it this morning, and the first committee goal, I mean, that's pretty much what we're trying to stick to, is having quarterly meetings. We're planning on June 22nd at 1 p.m., having one September 28th, and then October 26th, and that will be a virtual training from Terry related to the personnel manual. So I think the committee goal of meeting quarterly or as needed, I think we do that. This is our first meeting this year. I guess this year has just kind of gotten away from us a little bit. We've been so busy. I know Kendall has with General Assembly. But I think we're going to make up for, for meetings that we missed.
Susie, can you repeat those dates? So we can write them down.
Yes, June 22nd at 1 p.m. And then September 28th. And then October 26th. And that will be a virtual training with Terry related to the personnel guide. And then we're also going to have a committee meeting at the annual meeting. Okay. So the next committee goal was assess administrative operations training program needs, which is what we've been doing as we ask you all for feedback. We did think it would make sense where it's a strategy for implementation. Instead of just saying partner with the VACDE, we do have so many partners. We thought it'd be better to change it to say partner with cooperating agencies or partners to develop a better understanding of needs, as well as a list of staff skills and strengths. We want to make sure it's inclusive of everybody we work with. And we do, to make that happen, we serve on the VACDE committee. We participate at Graves Mountain training, annual meeting planning. And a lot of these topics, if we don't cover them at one place, we're making sure we carry those topics on to another opportunity for training. The next one was offer assistance to districts through operational training opportunities. And we will be working with the VACDE for Graves training in August. The virtual training with Terry will be in the fall of 22, and then the annual meeting of 22. And we'll finalize all this or put it in a draft form and send it out to everybody. I know it's a lot easier sometimes to look at it instead of having it read to you, but this will go before the board at the association level to be approved in June. Is that right, Kendall?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The next goal we thought was okay as it is, provide guidance on administrative operations training program through the SWCD and VACDE annually, which we do those things. Then the next one, and this is something Kendall and I talked about, we had on here, provide a mentoring network for administrative staff. And that is something we haven't done so far. And we wanted to know from you all, what does that look like? Is that something you're still interested in doing? Do you want to omit this at that time? What are your thoughts? Okay. Sheila, what do you think? I mean, do you think there's still a need for that, or is that something we could take off of one of our goals? Do you think we kind of maybe achieve part of that goal through these admin ops committee meetings?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can do it that way, but I guess it's just that we had talked about this and compiling a list of district employees and of course area, it should be per area, but that if you're new, you have someone to call and you don't have to sit and struggle, which I'm going to be honest, I struggled when I first came on. So I think you don't want to feel overwhelmed if you start. And if you don't have a good onboarding process, which I don't know that a lot of districts do, if they do, maybe that needs to go, or it really actually does need to go in the personnel management book.
Okay.
Because I think it's imperative that when you have a new employee, you don't talk to them for 2 hours and then be like, okay, well, you're on your own. Come back if you have any questions.
Right.
I think it is really important. That's just my opinion.
Hey Sheila, this is Brianna. I just wanted to say from the VA CDE side of things, I've been working on coming up with a mentor-mentee kind of survey for anyone who's interested to fill out. If you think you are really good at attachment E, or you're really good at making a really effective treasurer's report, those are kind of the things that we want you to, this is what I could help, a new person with. Because I know when I got here, I went to Tara for pretty much everything admin. So that's definitely something we're going to be putting together, and that'll be coming out relatively soon. But that way we can get a list together and we can share it with people who have specific skill sets, so that anyone new might be able to reach out to those people specifically.
That sounds great.
Okay.
So Bree, maybe that's something I could talk with you about, and we can figure out a way if we can maybe include that in some of the documentation that's getting ready to go out with our personnel guide or something like that.
Sounds perfect.
Okay. And I saw you had your hand up.
Yes, I was just going to agree with Heather and Brianna. A list of topics, and then maybe send it out to districts and say who would be willing to be a mentor. And then the question is, who would be comfortable providing information, who needs the information. So then you could match, you can, that way everybody kind of knows who's an expert on one subject and who needs help on a certain subject.
Okay.
You can match people up so that one district, say if one district has somebody who's really experienced, they can't handle phone calls all over the state for every subject. But if they were willing to take on, one specific topic, creating classes in QuickBooks or something that's, outside of the realm of our, the rest of our staff, people would know who they could call.
Okay. So we're going to leave that on there then. And I'll talk with Bree about what the VA CDE is doing. And then I'll talk with Kendall about maybe us sending out an email just requesting, if anybody's interested in being on that mentor list. Okay. So we'll leave that on there. The next thing, which we talked about a little bit earlier, the reviewing and updating the personnel management binder. The association contracted with Terry to update that. And she'll be doing the virtual training in October. And then the annual meeting, we'll be having some sessions, breakout sessions related to that. Now, the next thing was assist in planning director training opportunities, establishing subcommittees to assist in the development of the training agenda. And we had as needed. We were doing the director admin trainings, and I know we'd had a lot of really good positive feedback about those. And with COVID, a lot of the trainings and stuff were canceled. And we're just now this year starting to get back into meeting in person. This will be our first annual meeting in a couple of years. So what we're thinking is maybe leave this on here, but look at that as maybe a goal for next year, is to try and incorporate that director admin training again, like we did before. Then the other thing, and it was just an addition to the annual plan, we were talking about adding that compensation study that Terry's working on, and that she would compile the data from districts in May and June. And then in July 22, it would be distributed to districts. So that's what we had from kind of going over it real quickly this morning. If there's anything you all would like to add or change, let Kendall or I know. But it will be going to the association board in June for approval. And so our next topic was going to be the roundtable items, but because of time, we can't really cover all of those. So we're going to pick a date in mid-May to have like a session on these roundtable items. If you come up with anything else that you're looking at as a training topic idea, send those to us in the meantime, and then we'll tackle those when we meet in May. And that's all I had. Kendall, did you want to talk about the OAG?
Honestly, I'm hoping all of you have heard it. It is included in your CBC reports this month too. I've talked with Grant many times lately. His final day is this Friday. If you need any support or questions to your AG, the agenda had one more time listed. Michael Jacobs, the Senior Assistant Attorney General Section Chief. It is Grant's boss in the interim, and his contact information if you needed any AG support.
I thank you all for joining us today. Just keep a lookout for information from Terry requesting compensation information. And we will be sending out an email about the meeting in May. I think someone asked about doing a doodle poll on it. I'm not sure because we're kind of going to be working with Terry's schedules.
Are we? Maybe.
Maybe.
Susie and I can work
Yeah.
through that and see if there's a hour that works for this group, or if anything, you're going to be working with my Zoom schedule also to ensure that it doesn't conflict with some of our other trainings and meetings. But for May, some meeting between now and June 22nd, because I recognize and appreciate your understanding that ahead of our next 3 o'clock Zoom schedule we've booked on here, there's a lot of topics in the roundtable that I want us to discuss. And I think there is value if we just pull us together without an agenda that lets you open, discuss any of these topics or anything else that's just been pressing on your mind of late. So certainly I get it. Schedules are filling up fast. We'll make sure we nail that down this week for folks. At least get that survey out if that will be of assistance, or at least toss out a date or two that works for our Zoom schedule, and if Terry wants to join to help answer any of those questions. We have a few minutes still before that 3 o'clock hour. If you wanted to talk about any of those roundtable topics, any of those annual report questions, your plan of work, I can put one of you on the spot for the roundtable items, mostly because I left them all anonymous except one, the very top one. Is Blue Ridge still on the line? I would love for you, if you don't mind, taking a moment to tell us about your Employment Commission audit and some of the findings that might be of value.
Okay, yeah, I'm here. I'll be glad to share my experience with y'all, because I don't think many of you have had the pleasure of being audited by the VEC. But what they found, Franklin County government does our payroll for us, and they've been doing it since 2004. But in 2007, the Franklin County finance director had told our administrative assistant to start reporting our Virginia Employment Commission wages to the VEC. And so she's been doing that since 2007. But during this audit, they found that Franklin County had also been reporting our wages to the VEC. So therefore, the wages were being double reported. And what that would mean is if one of our employees had to file for unemployment, they would get double the benefits, which could be potentially disastrous for the VEC and for our employees as well. So what they're having to do is they're going to go back and they're going to have to take out our wages that have been reported, and they can only go back for about 3 years, she thinks. But in the meantime, we have paid the VEC since 2007 over $2,000. But they can, like she said, she could probably only go back 3 years and she's not sure if we will be reimbursed for that. Maybe she's thinking maybe a credit. And then at the end of the year, if we want to call Richmond and see if we can get reimbursed for that, that's possible. But she's not exactly sure if we will be reimbursed. But that's all I've got for the VEC.
Questions? Others who've had a VEC audit that want to discuss?
Is there anything? We've got a couple minutes left. Anybody else have anything they wanted to bring before the group? Okay. Well, thanks everyone for coming.
Kathy, do you want to speak to that? Because I am intrigued, because it is not the first district that has had a VEC audit since I've been around.
Yeah, we received a notice that we were going to be audited by them a few years ago. And I reached out because we had never been audited before. And at that time, I was told that it was a glitch in their system and that soil and water districts are not subject to VEC audits because we are government agencies.
Yes, and we told Ms. Hilton that we were a government agency, but they didn't know that we were. But she said that she was going to go forward with the audit, and when she did, she found, that's when we found out that Franklin County was also reporting our wages. So they went ahead with the audit.
Well, guys, I expect you to come to whatever hour session we pull together between now and June 22nd, ready to talk, because I will not have an agenda and I will not overdo it like I did on today's for you. It will literally be, this is your chance to come talk about topics that are of interest to you that we should be discussing, and no other speakers or agenda. And I'm hoping a starting point might be these bullet points that are listed on your agenda for roundtable. I would love to hear where you are on these topics, but that hour will be what you make of it. So if you have other topics you want to add to it, come ready to discuss and prepare. I dropped a little bit of comments in the chat box too, in response to Kathleen's question about responsibilities of a co-chair. If someone wants to step forward and help Susie and myself and Terry with the leadership of this group, Kathleen makes a good point. This group has grown tremendously. And if there is someone who's interested in this role that wants to step up, please give me a ring directly. I'm happy to chat, but I really think we're just looking to help balance workload and project coordination. We've got salary comparable study, retainer hours, personnel management manual update going on, a list of trainings that have started to come together, a plan of work that has been loosely discussed today that you'll get a bit more direction, especially because this plan of work is supposed to be your plan of work. And I heard more conversation around other topics. So when Susie sends out this draft, I really hope we get some feedback, because I don't know that I feel comfortable taking it to a board yet until I hear a lot more of, yes, this is exactly the direction I want us to go as an admin ops committee. It's helping with that workload that a co-chair might really be able to step up into a leadership role. Okay. Feel like we covered a lot in 2 hours, and yet we didn't cover nearly enough. So I hope that's the takeaway for the committee. We have a lot more work to be done, and I'm really excited about charting some of that territory between now and June, and in our projects that you've outlined already. I'm always a phone call away in the interim, so don't hesitate to reach out. I'll leave it on a little bit if y'all want to talk.
Thank you.